Greetings from the CSIR Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology. I'm Anurag Agrawal, a senior fellow in clinical and public health. During the course of this pandemic, my institute was focusing on diagnosis and surveillance, both being critical elements. In diagnosis, we were focusing on CRISPR-based diagnostics. I'll not speak much about it, since my colleague, Dr. Debojyoti Chakrabarti, has already spoken about this in this class gathering. But very briefly, it's a nucleic acid amplification test, does not require a qPCR machine, gives you a band like shown here on the figure, but does require RNA isolation and amplification. I'll spend my few minutes talking about the potential of next generation sequencing in both viral diagnostics as well as surveillance. Starting with surveillance, we basically looked at 500 genomes in the first few months for the spread of the virus across the country. What we found was quite interesting. The initial entry of the virus from China into Kerala was actually quite well controlled. It was actually subsequent waves, some coming from Iran, some coming from West Europe, some coming from America, that actually led to the bulk of the spread. But the biggest surprise was a true pan-national seeding was from a super spreader event that came from Southeast Asia with people all over the country testing positive for this novel strain that we called A4. In any case, as of today, the D614G coming from Western Europe has become by far the most dominant, and A4, which was heavily mutated, has died out. We do not know if the clinical outcomes were different, but it's a very good area to look into. When we started using large-scale NGS of thousands of samples in one go for a combination of diagnostics and surveillance, that too yielded some interesting insights. In the state of Kerala, with three waves shown here as K1, K2, and K3, you can see that the initial wave was local, came from outside, but was very well controlled. Subsequent waves, with the attention of India primarily moving to foreign entry of the virus, was actually because of local spread from surrounding states, probably by surface transport from commercial truckers and so on. And you can see that over here in K2 and K3. Today, we are working with the government of Kerala to see whether we can do this at scale on a regular basis to inform them where the virus is coming from, where it is spreading. Similar efforts to this, where we are sequencing multiple samples of viruses, including those from suspected reinfections, has allowed us to show that in multiple cases in India, reinfections have occurred. But the biggest limitation of using nucleic acid diagnostics is scale. The number of infections can be far greater than the number of cases. Recognizing this, we started the CSIR Phenome cohort. We have 38 labs spread all over India, shown here by various markers. Over 10,000 employees and their relatives have been sampled, and we have found very, very different seropositivity rates across the country. They are as low as 1% in peripheral parts of India away from the cities, and as high as 20% in the major cities. Within this 20%, if we were to look at separately contract workers, the rates are as high as 30 to 50%, suggesting the epidemic has run its course in many Indian cities. The interesting thing is that the majority of infections have been very, very asymptomatic, and local transmission seems to be the norm in mid to large cities. But one very important lesson we have learned has been in digital health. During the shutdown, during this mass collection of data sharing, digital has been the keyword. But on-ground presence remains absolutely critical. If you don't have healthcare infrastructure on the ground, nothing else will really work. But what is very good is that India has launched a national digital health mission in which digital platforms are public goods to be made freely available for efficiency. I'll stop here. Thank you very much. Good evening.